I really needed some good advice. And I thought I could get it from my grandfather. This was about 6 months into my freelance career. I had been living in Los Angeles for about 6 months. I was sharing a studio apartment with a really close friend of mine. We had a bunk bed in one corner of the room. We had a kitchen in the second corner of the room. We had a desk in the third corner of the room, and we had a bathroom in the fourth corner of the room. And I was trying, but not really succeeding, to pay my half of the rent with the money that I made freelancing. 3 times I got dishwashing gigs to make a little extra cash. Twice I had to borrow money from my brother to pay rent. Once I even decided to quit freelancing altogether and go get a real job, only to discover pretty quickly after that short-term freelance gigs for a few $100 don't look that good on a resume. And even though I wanted a real job, the people who were giving out real jobs didn't want to give one to me. So at this specific moment, I really needed some good advice, and I thought I could get it from my grandfather because for many years, many decades, he ran a successful appraisal business. And I had seen him over the course of many decades take care of clients consistently and work with repeat clients. And I knew that he probably had some secrets or some strategies about how I could find new clients. And this is what I really needed at the time. I needed a strategy to grow my business. I needed a strategy to find new clients. I honestly just needed a little bit of a strategy to stop getting dropped by my current clients at that moment. So I'm standing there in the kitchen with my grandfather, and I'm looking up at him. He's a tall man, but he's always been a quiet man, and when he speaks, he's been a man of wisdom. He's one of those guys. And I lay it all out on the table for him. I tell him, business is really slow. I'm having trouble finding new clients. I don't know where to look. And I lay it all on a platter for him. And he looks down at me, and he says, "Keep going. You'll figure it out." Keep going? You'll figure it out? At the time, this was the last thing I wanted to hear. What about all those strategies? What about those secrets, Grandpa? Keep going. You'll figure it out. Well, I did keep going. And little by little, some things started to land for me. Little by little, I did start to figure a few things out. I produced social campaigns and digital campaigns for brands like DJI and Red Bull. I produced music videos for one of the most streamed artists in the world, the Chainsmokers. I wrote copy and sales pages for some big influencers, helping them sell online classes and in-person workshops. And the whole time I was documenting everything I was learning on my blog. In 2018, I decided to challenge myself to write 30 blogs in 30 days. And I did that. So in 2019, I challenged myself a little bit more. I decided to write 60 blogs in 60 days. So then in 2020, I had the crazy idea, what if I wrote 100 blogs in 100 days? And on the last day of 2020, I wrote my 100th blog in as many days. So on the first day of 2021, I said, I'm going to publish every single day this year. So from mid-September of 2020 until the very last day of 2021, I published 465 blogs in a row, documenting everything that I was learning. And even though I didn't realize it at the time, keep going was the best piece of advice that I could have received. Because there were so many lessons that I learned along the way that never would have sunk in unless I learned them the hard way. Even if I was given the best strategy to find new clients and to grow my business, it never would have sunk in unless I lived that experience and learned that lesson the hard way. And this is what I want to speak to you about tonight. I believe that anyone can achieve any creative ambition they have for themselves if they can just keep going. Of course, the problem with platitudes like "don't give up" or "just keep going" is that it's really hard, isn't it? Insecurity stalks us. Failure discourages us. It crushes us. Inspiration and motivation, they get us into things, and then they disappear when we need them the most. And this is why as creatives and as freelancers, we shouldn't be optimizing our businesses for profit. We shouldn't be optimizing them for notoriety or a great brand. We shouldn't even be optimizing them for creativity, but we should be optimizing our freelance careers, our creative careers for longevity. To be able to stay in the game for the long haul, to weather the ups and the downs, to learn all the lessons that we need to learn, to let them all sink in so that all of our creative ambitions can come to life. Today, I have 3 practical mindsets that will help increase your longevity as a creative and as a freelancer and keep you in the game long enough to learn all the lessons you need to know for all your creative ambitions to come to life. The first mindset is inspired by a single question, and that question is this: what would you do if you couldn't succeed? What would you do if you couldn't succeed? What would you do if the best you could achieve, if the very best you could hope to accomplish was just an average salary for an average amount of time with an average amount of respect and notoriety? I'm not asking what would you do as in like how would you solve this or how would you kick against this? That's not what I'm asking. What I'm asking is what would you do as in what would you be working on if the best you could hope to achieve was just mediocrity? And this question is similar to a different question that I'm sure you've heard and I'm sure you've been asked before, maybe by a mentor or a guidance counselor. That question is, what would you do if you couldn't fail, right? What would you do if you couldn't fail? And I think for most people, this question is harmless enough. You know, it begs people to dream a little bit. It dares them to take a risk. But the trouble with what would you do if you couldn't fail for creative people like me and like you is that we're too creative for that. There's so many things that we'd like to be doing if we couldn't fail. But I know for me personally, if I couldn't fail, I'd like to be a brooding novelist who people call the next John Steinbeck. If I couldn't fail, that sounds amazing. If I couldn't fail, I'd like to be the TV announcer for the San Francisco Giants. If I couldn't fail, I'd be hosting late night, or I'd be on a sitcom, the comic relief of a sitcom. If I couldn't fail, all that stuff sounds amazing. But the truth is, I can fail. And I have failed. And I've been late on bills. And I've borrowed money to make rent. And I've messed up big projects. And I've been crushed under the weight of stress. And this brings us back to our original question. What would you do if you couldn't succeed? If the best you could hope to achieve was just something mediocre, it wouldn't make too much sense to sacrifice too much time with your friends or your family, or to do. It would only make sense to be working on something that you really, really love. If all you could hope to achieve would be just mediocrity. And so this is what I want to speak to you. This is my first point, is that this love is what will keep you in the game long enough. This love equals longevity. If you're really doing something that you know that you love, then that's going to be the thing that keeps you in the game long enough to learn all the lessons that you need to know for all your creative ambitions to come to life. So that's my first mindset, my first practical mindset to help increase your longevity. My second practical mindset is this: that there's so much power in being yourself. After I found some initial success as a freelancer, I started to think about growth. I started to ask myself what it would look like if I could expand my network and grow my business. I really wanted to keep this success going, and these were questions that I couldn't really answer on my own. So I found another producer who was more successful than me, who had worked on bigger projects than me, who was a few years older than me, and I asked him the dreaded question. I asked him if I could take him to lunch and pick his brain. And thankfully, to me, he obliged. And we got to lunch, and we sat down, and we ordered a burger and a beer. We got through the pleasantries, and then finally I started asking him all the questions that I really wanted to know. How could I grow my business? Where should I find these clients? How should I be talking to them? How should I be pitching them? What should I be saying? What should I be wearing? What should I be driving? How should I be trying to come across? And after I finished my rambling, he patiently sat and he listened. And he looked at me across the table and he said, "You don't need to do all that. Just be yourself." And at that moment, a wave of peace and confidence just rushed over me. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, what a keynote this is. This guy just told me not to give up, and now he's telling me to be myself. And you might be wondering, are we going to sing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star next? And that's a fair question. But the reason that just be yourself was so impactful to me at that moment, and the reason that this idea resonates so deeply with so many creatives and freelancers that I speak to, is because we don't feel like we can be ourselves. We feel like we need to be someone else, talk like someone else, act like someone else, in order to slice off just a sliver of this success that we desire. And part of this makes sense. Because when I started my freelance career, I found some initial success by imitating. I tried to email like other people emailed. When I was on calls, I tried to talk the same way. When they were on calls, I saw their pitches, I tried to pitch the same way. And when they barked, I tried to bark back. And let me tell you, it was exhausting. It was exhausting. I was playing someone else's game on someone else's court with someone else's rules, and I was still losing. And I got to a point where I realized how much time I was spending as a creative and as a freelancer not being myself. I realized how much time I was spending trying to be someone else just to slice off a little sliver of success. And I realized that it wasn't a worthy concession. It wasn't a worthy trade-off. So I tried something crazy. All the dumb little jokes that would pop into my head when I was on calls with clients, I started saying those. Instead of approaching my crews as a producer who had it all figured out, who knew everything, I started approaching them as a collaborator, as a friend. Instead of trying to interact with talent on set as a producer who had everything figured out and who was super cool, I just tried to approach the talent as myself, as Reese. And you'll never guess what happened. When I told all those dumb little jokes to my clients on those calls, they laughed. My crews started going the extra mile for me on set because they saw that I saw them as a collaborator, not as just a pawn to move around a board. The talent on set, when they saw that I was approaching them as a human and not as someone who was a fan or who's trying to be too cool, they gave that humanity back to me in interviews. They went deep in interviews for me and gave that back to me on screen. You don't want to give up these portions of your personality that make you you just to have some kind of special job or some kind of thing that you're hoping for. It's not a worthy concession. But the good news is, if you're brave enough to try being yourself in these high-pressure situations, you will discover 3 great benefits. First, you'll discover that you like working with yourself more because you're not spending time trying to be someone else. You're not thinking about yourself. You're not being so self-conscious. You're just being yourself. You'll realize that you like working with yourself more. The second benefit is that you'll discover people like working with you more because they're no longer working with someone who is always putting on a front and trying to project and trying to be someone else. They're working with someone who's authentic and bringing their whole self to the table. But the most important one is the third one, and it's that being yourself with your work, doing the work that you really love, bringing your whole self to it, that increases your longevity. It keeps you in the game long enough to learn all those lessons that you need to learn for all your creative ambitions to come to life. So that's my second practical mindset that will increase your longevity, is to be yourself. There's so much power in being yourself. And my third practical mindset is this: to use margin to your advantage, to use it as a strategy. Now, it's not called living the dream if you're too stressed out to fall asleep. That's called a nightmare. You're not on that grind if you don't have any time to see your friends and your family. That's just called loneliness. It's not called freedom or flexibility if you don't know how to close the laptop, shut it down, and enjoy the moment. Now, there are so many benefits to this creative lifestyle and to this freelance lifestyle. You're challenged creatively. You can achieve this flexibility. Maybe you achieve what you feel like is self-actualization. But all these benefits are only available to the person who's able to achieve work-life balance. All those benefits, that flexibility, that creativity, can only really be enjoyed by someone who has a balanced lifestyle. So using margin in your life as a strategy. I'll give you an example. When you're cooking something, there are 2 things to consider, and that's heat and time. Now let's say I'm cooking a steak on a stove, for example. I could cook it on really high heat for a short amount of time, but it becomes really easy to burn the outside and leave the inside undercooked. On the flip side, I could just put it at low heat, put it in the oven, leave it, and it would get fully cooked, but it becomes really easy to dry out the inside. You won't achieve a nice char on the outside. There's a sweet spot between heat and time where you get this nice crust on the outside of a steak, for example. The inside is fully cooked and it's juicy. And there's a sweet spot that many good cooks, maybe some of you have figured that out, maybe some haven't yet. And there's a similar sweet spot when you're trying to achieve work-life balance as a freelancer. There's two things to consider when you're trying to achieve work-life balance as a creative or as a freelancer. And it's consistency and hustle. Now I can show up every day like a good little boy, and I can cross off everything on my to-do list, and I can put in my 8 hours, and I can do everything that's on my plate, so nothing is my fault. But if I'm not going the extra mile to push these projects over the line, if I'm not investing in my success, if I'm not taking full advantage of the opportunities that really come my way, then I won't stack up enough wins. I won't be getting the kinds of rewards that keep this freelance lifestyle sustainable. I'll just be sort of middling and floating along, and I won't get the kind of wins that keep me going. On the flip side, I can hustle like crazy. I can work nights and weekends, 16-hour days. I can listen to business podcasts on every single drive. I can say no to every social opportunity, and eventually, I'll burn out. Now, there are times in your life, I understand, there are seasons in your creative career, your freelance career, where you just need to put your head down and work, where you really need to hustle. There are times where you just need to get the work done, to take advantage of an opportunity, but that's all these should be. Seasons. Just times. There's a sweet spot. Finding this sweet spot between consistency and hustle is the key to achieving work-life balance as a freelancer. Making sure that you are showing up consistently, having good systems, getting your work done, making sure that you have enough time with your friends and family to invest into your personal resources, to your relational resources, to your mental resources, making sure you're leaving enough margin there, while also leaving enough margin on the hustle side so that when a real opportunity arises, you have enough gas in the tank to step on the gas and go make that opportunity happen. Sometimes when you're hustling like crazy, when you're in one of those seasons in your life where you're just getting things done and you're stacking up win after win after win, you feel like you can keep up this breakneck pace forever. But believe me, if you don't choose to slow yourself down, something else in your life will. If you're not investing into these personal resources or these relational resources, these mental resources, these spiritual resources, something else in your life will run a red light and T-bone you and knock you off the creative path for weeks or months or even years at a time. So finding this sweet spot is essential, and using margin strategically in your life and in your schedule is essential to keeping you in this game of longevity, to keeping you in the game long enough for you to learn all the lessons that you need to learn for all your creative ambitions to come to life. Not using margin as an excuse or as a way to hide from doing the real work, but strategically saving time and energy and emotional and financial resources so that when a real opportunity comes, you can step on the gas and make it happen. That's my third practical mindset that I have for you today. And again, I believe that anyone can make any creative ambition they have come to life if they can just keep going. And the key to just keeping going is having this longevity. And I believe you can. I believe you can just keep going if you're making sure that you're really working on something that you love. I believe you can just keep going if you trust that there's power in being yourself and you're brave enough to really bring your authentic personality to the work. That will increase your longevity. And I believe you can keep going if you strategically place margin into your life and into your schedule and use that to your advantage so that you can stay in the game long enough to learn all the lessons you need to learn for all your creative ambitions to come to life. Thank you.